All right. Yay. We
Yay.
are here with Dr. Adrian and so excited to talk about kind of what's going on health-wise with COVID-19 novel coronavirus, how we can stay healthy and safe,
Mm,
and kind of weed through the research and all the massive amounts of information that's out there about this healthcare crisis. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Adrian here because she's amazing. Like, check out her bio. She's an organizer with Migrante and other organizations. So well versed in both health and healing and community wellness, it sounds like. And it'll be fun to pick your brain a little bit.
what a glowing review. Oh my gosh, I'm just honored that you invited me and reached out. So thank you for cultivating this space.
Yay. Well, let's get it started. So, I always wonder what got you into natural medicine? What's your story around that?
Mm, I love this question because it kind of brings it back to who is my for whom and who do I do this work for and how did that all start, which is such a juicy topic. I think because
Totally.
you really learn about people.
Mhm.
But I think for me, it kind of started in my grandma's kitchen. Um, and in the Bay Area in California, and I was living with like my grandparents and my mom and cousins, and as it is for an immigrant community, it was like my Lola and my grandma's home remedies that kind of staved off fevers and colds and got us through any little hiccups. So we didn't need to go to the hospital, but partially because the hospital was just like really unaffordable for us at the time. So yeah, that kind of is what inspired my initial curiosity with like home remedies and kitchen medicine. But I was growing up. My grandparents started to become sick. Things that
Mhm.
are so common in immigrant families: high blood pressure, diabetes, and all of the side effects from those conditions. So we were just spending a lot of time in hospitals, and it became very clear to me how disproportionately people of color are represented in the big institutions. We didn't have translators. We spent 15 minutes with doctors that weren't even like speaking the same language or took the time to really educate. And so I saw my family being prescribed and put on medications, lifelong medications that, they couldn't, they had to take every day. And so they became really dependent on them. Um, and so, as my grandparents got older, they became more reliant on the medical system and hospitals. And to me, it was just, I started to see that hospitals weren't necessarily they weren't necessarily where people got well. It was kind of like the end stage of disease. And I know now that that's not totally the case. Hospitals can be very life saving, especially in this time that we're living in right now. But I wanted to see another way was possible. I wanted to really see that there were alternatives and options. And so that kind of pushed me on my path towards alternative medicine. I actually worked at an acupuncture clinic in Santa Cruz, and there was an acupuncture school near there. And a lot of the acupuncturists would like go to qigong like a few times a week, and I'd be like, "What's qigong? Like,
Mhm.
what does that have to do with healthcare?" But I think, yeah, generally, me wanting to get into natural medicine and eventually get into naturopathic medicine was wanting to connect to this sense of home and this inherent wisdom that my ancestors had known and that got passed on through generations, and how they trusted and lived off the land as their source of everything: food and medicine and just knowledge about the earth and how to work with the earth. Um, but I'd like to think my path in natural medicine also paralleled my like politicization or my political awakening, because as a brown person, even in naturopathic medical school, like we've talked about this, a lot of knowledge is actually taken from communities, and its roots aren't always highlighted in the classroom, which is unfortunate. So a lot of my medical school education was me also trying to connect to the traditions and cultures that the Philippines is rich with, and that kind of happened outside of the classroom. But as it is with formal education, a lot of our education is from the streets and from our communities. So yeah, that's my journey into natural medicine, and I think it's ongoing. I think I chose this field because I wanted to be a student forever, and
Mm.
that's like my constitution. I like to be busy and find solutions and all of that. Yeah.
I can so relate to that. It's such a beautiful story. I imagine a little version of you being in your grandmother's kitchen and like watching her prepare things, um, and then coming full circle to trying to reclaim that for yourself, and part of that story being the pain of seeing the failure of the systems in your own family. And
Mm-hmm.
I know I can relate to that as the child of an immigrant, and um, yeah, that weird dichotomy. I don't know about you, but my
Yeah.
parents, my dad wanted me to be a doctor, but also hates doctors. So it's like,
Yes, and it's hardest to treat our family because
oh,
they
yes.
they just
Yes.
know way better than we ever will.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, the healers and the family kind of take up the mantle of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh, and if you're joining us in the chat, let StreamYard give StreamYard permission to see your profile, because all we see is Facebook user. But yes, grandmommy chemistry is the best for sure.
Yeah.
Totally. Um, Man, so much richness in that. And we could have a whole hour-long talk
I
about
know.
reclaiming roots in medicine, which we'll have to have you back on the show.
Yeah, I'm there for it, for
Yeah.
sure.
So now that you are a naturopathic doctor and you have been exposed to all of these traditions, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of reclaiming your own traditions, how do you come to using herbs and natural remedies?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question.
'Cause there's such a broad range, right? From using them purely on their chemical constituents, but also like energetically in essences and everywhere in
Mhm.
between.
Yeah. I honestly like don't discriminate. I love them all. Um, mm, when it comes to like the chemical constituents, maybe I don't necessarily lean that way. I think I like to, or I tend more towards a folk method, but I really like to work all along the spectrum of possibility, especially when working with individuals, because what I prescribe or what I think may resonate with someone really depends on like their constitution or their own like healing background and traditions, like whether or not they have time to take something consistently, because herbal medicine really relies on consistent, maybe month long kind of regiment, or ritual to see an effect. And I think you know, I love flower essences. I love teas. I love tinctures. I love like herbal supplements. And so it's a little bit of everything, really just based on the person in front of me. But I do think I rely on my Western training in that there's a lot of information out there on herbs. Um, but not a lot of people are checking like drug interactions. And there are a
Mm.
lot of drug interactions when people are taking hormones or mood medications like SSRIs, or even like anti-anxiety medications like benzos, or um, and there's also like allergies to certain families of herbs. So that's something that like I'm always trying to like cross check with the person in front of me. And like, I like to use herbs that are generally safe for the majority of people. But what I hear really commonly are people saying like, "Oh yeah, I've taken that tincture of St. John's wort, and like I didn't notice anything." And that's oftentimes because what's found online doesn't have dosing. It's not customized to you and your like pathways of metabolism. And so I think a lot of it is also just like educating patients about what is accessible and how to dose them correctly. It's not like marijuana or a pharmaceutical where you might see like an immediate effect.
Mm.
Um, it takes yeah, time. So yeah, I mean that's kind of how I approach herbal medicine. I do like folk method, and that I'm like looking at people and their constitution and feeling their pulse and like looking at
Mhm.
their tongue and looking into their eyes to see, would they resonate more with like a flower essence? Do they like enjoy like a whisper approach, or are they like someone that has like a strong, sturdy constitution and they need like a shout type of
I love that. I
approach?
love that way of talking about it.
Yeah. So that's kind of my energetic method. I don't know that it's like a well, um, what is it? It can be like specifically defined as like energetic or
Mhm.
chemical.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really tuning into what the person needs and the individualization of the medicine, which I think is so key and often kind of glossed over in natural medicine and especially herbology that like modern medicine kind of tells us, oh, like this is the new fad, like everybody eat
Mm-hmm.
coconut oil. Oh wait, nobody eat coconut oil, or like it's always this
It's
like blanket statement.
confusing.
But in natural
Yeah.
medicine, most traditions are very specific to like it's not just a fever, it's like the quality of the fever. Like how does the person
Mm-hmm.
feel? Are they feeling chilly? Are they feeling hot? Are they sweating? Are they not sweating? Like it's very dialed in that way. It sounds like that's what you're describing, even, you know,
Exactly.
in the remedies that you're prescribing. And it also sounds like you're really taking an integrative approach. And I think of integrative medicine, like integrative medicine can happen from a natural perspective, but not
Yes.
really from a biomedical perspective. It's like as
Mm.
a natural physician or as a ND or as an acupuncturist, it's like the value systems of those old ways are such that they take in information and integrate it
Mm-hmm.
and accept other ways of doing things, but that's not really true vice versa. So
Mm.
it sounds like that is your approach of like taking in your western training or modern training of like pharmaceuticals and contraindications and integrating that with this folk medicine way of
Mm-hmm.
being. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And like, I'm a firm believer that like this knowledge should not be on a pedestal, and that it should be widely available and accessible. It's just ensuring that we're like approaching it safely, and even understanding like the energetics of an herb and where it's grown and where it's derived from also takes like
Right.
intentionality.
Totally.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
integration. Um,
Yeah.
but that's such a funny word because it always makes me cringe a little. I'm like, oh, integrative. But yes, of course.
Yeah, exactly. It like I think of it as which paradigm do you want to live in, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
can you take in information and other ways of being or can you not, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that about natural medicine. It feels like it's always evolving in that way. You know, even in the
Yeah.
midst of this crisis, right? I see all these herbalists and Chinese medicine practitioners everywhere, like talking about like what does this mean and getting new information, like, okay, this remedy and now that remedy, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
and um and something I wanted to talk about too in that vein is all the information coming at us
Yes.
and how um you know, to me, natural medicine is poised in a really interesting way to address the crisis. And also, there's a lot of nuance, right?
Mm.
So, how do you, like, what are you seeing out there in the research that you think people really need to know about? And, you know, if somebody's thinking about how to, you know, someone's staying at home, but they're also thinking about how to support their own immunity and, like, what are interventions or remedies or vitamins and minerals that are kind of safe for most people if we want to build
Yeah.
our medicine cabinet? I know those are two big questions.
Yeah, okay. No, those are great questions. That just like gets to the essence of I think where people are at now. Like this month of March, it's been like things change day to day, week by week, and now people are ready and like hungry for how they can actively take care of their immune systems and also get involved in like the community aspect of what's happening to all of us. So maybe where should I start?
Did you prep with some notes for us?
I did, of course.
Awesome.
um, Maybe like the part where what people should know about how like where things are at today, because maybe what we
Yeah,
talk about today is going to be a little bit different than what it's going to look like in a month from now.
totally.
But what I've been talking to a lot of my patients about and what people have the most questions about are kind of aligned in three different areas. Like, how do I get it? How do I protect my community? And then, like, what happens if I do get it? Um, and so, there, like, you can totally get dizzied in the amount of information around those three topics. Um, but I kind of like it's pretty common knowledge now how we get it. Like, this is why we're in this place of like physical distancing. But what I kind of want to highlight is that it's transmitted like mostly in the home and through families because of like the sustained contact that we have to people in our families or people in our homes. So it's totally safe to go to the grocery store. It's fine. Just wash your hands, because it is transmitted from face to hands or hands to face, which includes like the eyes, the nose, the throat. Like the virus loves those moist areas in our face. And so it's really when we're not like washing our hands or like going out and like hugging everyone, that like the virus is able to like jump from people to people. Um, and now we're seeing that it's people that don't exhibit symptoms yet that are shedding the virus. Um, which, there was like cruise ship data that came out recently that, you know, it takes like 1 to 2 days before someone is symptomatic, but in those 1 to 2 days, they're like shedding the virus. So it's really important to like, if we go out and we interact with others, to just keep tabs on who we interact with. That way we're able to like inform people, should we contract the virus, or just like who we're around, who is in our little isolation circle, and who are we kind of interacting with for a sustained amount of time. So that's like the very tip of the iceberg on how to get it, but a lot of that information is just like out there on the CDC. It's out
Mhm.
there on like our county's health department, on our Oregon Health Authority. Like those are the people that I'm really trusting for these updates because they're updating it every day, and they're working with epidemiologists and infectious disease specialists. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the how to get it, but most people are pretty tuned into that aspect already. Um, Also, I'm seeing like great resources that community have been putting out on how to protect everyone in your community. Um, and without like panicking people, I think we just need to be aware that it is in our community. It's in your community, it's in my community. Um, and like the reality is, and why everyone for a while has been in a panic, is just because the virus is new and the human immune system has never been in contact with it before, and so it it worries people that there's no vaccine or there's no cure, but that doesn't mean that our bodies don't know what to do. Our bodies know how to fight viruses, and if you fall in the generally well population without any risk factors, you are able to fight the infection because our bodies have this inherent wisdom about what to do, how to mount a fever, how to get rid of, or how to get rid of discharge, how how our bowel movements kind of help us detox everything. Um, and most people that contract the virus end up developing immunity to it. And as immunity is being developed, over time, this will just become more mild, and it'll just be something as common as a cold or the flu. Not that those things are comfortable to go through,
Right.
but it's new, and so we're developing immunity to it, and there are measures in place that we're just needing to evolve around. What else? Oh, what to do if you get it? Okay.
Well, I also, it's interesting that you mentioned gut, and like being and like keeping the bowels moving. I feel like that's a very traditional herbalist approach where you like keep everything open and moving, right? And
Yes.
but even we both listened to the podcast from Dr. Heather Zwicky, who is an immunologist who works also at the Naturopathic College in Portland, and how, and she was even saying from an immunologist, I can't say that word,
Immunology.
immunological
Immunological, yes,
perspective.
yes.
Thank you. There you go. So many syllables. How it's important to have a healthy gut, right? Which we don't think about. Think
Mm-hmm.
in modern medicine, the gut lung axis, but shows up in Chinese medicine, shows up in traditional herbalism as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure as a naturopath, you're keyed into gut health, and
I
that's
love
probably going
talking
to
about
be
food.
part of it's so key. We're going back to the basics. Those are
Mm-hmm.
actually our best immune boosters. So uh,
Exactly.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sure you're going to
No,
dive right into that. But
yeah, no, I mean gut health, it helps us address any like systemic inflammation. It's like the number one thing that we ask, or I ask my patients. It's considered our second brain. Yeah,
right,
it's
all those serotonin receptors up
yes,
in there, keeping us
exactly.
healthy mentally and physically.
Exactly.
Yeah,
What were we talking about?
our medicine cabinets.
Oh, our medicine
So,
cabinets.
yeah,
Okay. Well, maybe you can just highlight some of the foundational things that maybe goes without saying, but I'm just going to say it
it's
because
good to say it. Yeah.
this this we don't often get rewarded spaciousness like we are
Mhm.
now, and I know that it's not true for everyone. There's a lot of frontliners that are still out there, people working in grocery stores, delivery, um, janitorial staff at hospitals like are not getting enough credit for like the important
Mhm.
work that they're
Oof,
doing.
true.
Um, but for those of us that are able to work from home, that get to stay at home through this time. It's really an opportunity to create new habits or reassess the ones that we've been engaging with. And so incorporating as many foundational immune boosting things are just like, yeah, let's take advantage of this time to create like long-term change.
Oof. Yeah.
So, I mean, the obvious things, hygiene, wash your hands. But for me, my hands get really dry with all the hand washing. So moisturize also. I think it's like bringing more mindfulness to how often we're touching our face. Hydration is everything. Movement, engaging in movement that brings you joy. Kitchen dancing, morning dance.
Awesome. Yeah.
Going for walks, home exercises. There's also some like great uh, folks of color that are releasing like workout routines and dance routines. So I've been like keeping a list of those and trying to mark those off. Sleep is number one. Um, what is the quality of your sleep right now? How many hours are you getting? Studies are now showing that at least 7 hours of sleep is needed, and is helpful in the release of melatonin, which is really protective against the virus. So if
Oof.
you're not
Yeah.
yet at 7 hours of sleep, do everything that you can to clean up those sleep habits. And so that can look like meditation, qigong, stretching, some light reading, some great like herbal sleepy teas, even the use of melatonin itself at a very low dose is something that is being researched. Also, reducing like sugar intake, which includes alcohol consumption, which is kind of uh, a double-edged sword because what else can we do in this time? A lot of people are engaging in virtual happy hours, everything in moderation. But
Even moderation.
sugar does immobilize white blood cells for anywhere from 20 minutes to 5 hours. So if you are like showing any symptoms, it's important to avoid any refined sugar.
Is that
Um,
specifically refined sugar? Because I know there's, and does that mean honey? Are there
I
sweeteners?
think honey's fine. It's mostly like that white sugar that's often in like processed products, food
Mhm.
products. I think like natural sugars that are coming from fruits are fine, but maybe don't eat like 5 bananas, but eat a few, throughout the day. Um, yeah, mostly the refined. And I know baking is really popular right now, so
I have noticed that. Everybody's get
maybe
their
like,
bake on.
yeah, don't eat all the cookies that you bake, but moderation. If you made it at home, you know what goes in it. I think more power to you in that sense. Like, because eating food that brings you joy is also like
Hmm.
stress reducing and relieving. Um, and they're also seeing like if you do have a smoking habit, they're seeing, obviously I don't need to hit the hammer on the head with smoking, but it's something that it would be a great time to work with a physician on maybe setting a quit date and what like strategies like that look like, or other herbs that can be supportive. If you do have a smoking habit, studies are just showing, people are sicker for longer if they do smoke. Um, and then, yeah, nutrition. We talked a bit about that, but cooking at home, eating as whole foods as you can have, or whatever's growing in your gardens, whatever you have access to. I also learned that folks that rely on SNAP and WIC benefits, they get most of their benefits at the beginning of the month, so April 1st. So it's recommended that, if you want to support the community, maybe in an invisible way, is to avoid grocery shopping from the 1st to the 3rd to allow those folks to be able to get things off the shelf, which are otherwise like um, essentials for everyone.
I
So
love
like
that.
something small that
Yeah.
we can do. So those are like the foundational things. There's a lot of information about what we can introduce and take regularly to support our immune system. I'm going to talk about the stuff that's generally safe and things that I have at home. Um, and maybe just a little bit about the research behind them. But maybe we can just like include some information later through
Mhm.
links.
Totally.
But something that is really interesting that's being studied, studies coming out of China and South Korea, are use of IV vitamin C in
Hmm.
hospitals to improve recovery time. They're also adding other things to the IV, like anti-malarial medications and zinc, and it's a whole concoction. But if you aren't showing symptoms and you're generally well, vitamin C is something safe that we can introduce. Um, the studies of IV vitamin C are up to 20 grams, which is
Wow.
very high dose vitamin C. But I'm talking about like if we're taking it at home, something very um, accessible is something like 6,000 a day in divided doses. And of course, this isn't medical advice. I'm just telling you what the studies
We'll have a
are
disclaimer.
saying.
Yes. Yes, please.
Something that I am doing for myself.
Yeah. And
Um,
how does that compare with eating citrus, for example, like taking vitamin C?
mhm.
Like, can you get the same dosage if you eat like 6 mandarin oranges or something like that?
You would have to eat a few pounds of vitamin C to get the concentration of
Yeah.
what's found in most supplements. Um, so yeah, it like I'm all about whole foods, and so like yes, eat some mandarins, but it's also great to increase the dose with some supplementation.
Mhm.
So if you are eating citrus, maybe you wouldn't need as much vitamin C a day, but it's nowhere near the amount that's available and dried and packaged in a supplement.
Mhm.
Um,
And
oh, go ahead.
does it matter if it's like there's vitamin C powder, there's capsules, there's all kinds of different ways to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Does
Um,
the does the way you take it matter?
um, well, don't make yourself an IV drip at home,
No
but
syringes.
it's really just depends on the brand that you have at home. Like it's really important to look at the nutrition facts because sometimes they're full of other filler that aren't
Mhm.
necessarily active ingredients. So I like to refer patients to some trusted vitamin C sources. But I mean, I like emergency. I like airborne. Generally, those I think airborne also has some really nice herbs in it. But those are only 1,000 milligrams, so you would have to take quite a few to um, get a preventative dose in. So definitely something you might want to customize with a practitioner you're working with.
Mhm.
Maybe they know a brand that has a little bit more, so you don't have to down like 10 pills.
Yeah, because you said 6 grams
Yeah, or six
daily,
thousand
six
milligrams.
thousand milligrams. So that's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of vitamin C.
Yeah, and that's all only for prevention too. It's
Wow.
not
Yeah.
necessarily what people are using if they are confirmed to be sick.
Hmm.
Something else I love, vitamin D. I think many of us are just naturally deficient living in the Pacific Northwest, if you are in the Pacific
Yes.
Northwest. So vitamin D into your regimen is really wonderful. Um, Zinc at bedtime.
Why
Um,
bedtime?
I'm not sure. I think it's just to like mix it up.
So you're
I,
not taking a million pills in the morning.
exactly. And I think there's it's also because it's a cofactor for a few neurotransmitters that get reproduced in the gut during when we're sleeping. So maybe energetically, it makes sense to give our body more cofactors at that time when we are resting and our immune system is active. Um, yeah.
What's the dosage on zinc in that case?
Zinc is around like 15 to 30 milligrams at bedtime is what's being studied. Yeah. And vitamin D is up to like 10,000 IUs a day, or 5,000, depending on if you've been taking vitamin D throughout the colder seasons or not. But also something maybe you might want to customize if you've had recent lab work done. But yes, generally we're all deficient in vitamin D. Um, And then we were talking about gut health. So, I think there's nothing better than eating like dark leafy greens for sources of fiber. But if you needed extra support, like probiotics are also being recommended at this time, just because we want like the gut integrity to be as strong as possible to be able to detox and clear any toxicity that may be floating around in the body. And probiotics that have at least 20 billion live probiotics is generally safe to take.
It sounds like that would be a general gut health probiotic versus like
Yeah,
something more specific for mood or vaginal health.
for sure. Yes. So something else that you might want to consult with a doc on. Um, Mention melatonin. It's some people love, some people hate melatonin, but it's really just about optimizing sleep. Um, and so melatonin in a low dose, like 1 milligram or less, which isn't commonly found in a pill form. It's mostly found like in a liquid or drop form at that dose. So something else to consider. There's also studies, now we get into the herbs. There's some studies around black tea and pu'er and green tea as kind of having an effect on the viral envelope, not of this specific coronavirus, but of the coronavirus family of viruses. And so drinking a healthy amount of tea every day can be really protective.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah. And then, like, what I'm seeing more commonly from my patients, they like have had fevers before, they've had upper respiratory things before, but I think just the amount of news is like the most stressful part. And so it's really like supporting the nervous system, and there's like really great herbs that can do so, that are also immune supportive, like lemon balm and passion flower, ashwagandha, turmeric. They all have immune modulatory effects. And if you do happen to get sick, those would be safe to take. That wouldn't negatively impact like the immune system. So yeah, those are what I found. What about you?
I
Any
love
research curious?
elderberry.
I
It's
love
such a,
elderberry.
yeah, it's so beloved in so many traditions, right? And I know, elderberry has shown to have cytokine activity in research trials previously, and so people are a little afraid of it for this virus because
Mm-hmm.
there is a lot of there. One of the things that happens is increased cytokine activity, which really just means the immune system is a little bit overstimulated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen different recommendations, right? That it's still safe to use preventatively, but if you start having symptoms, to stop. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, actually.
That's also what I'm seeing, but I think it's as preventative, it's generally safe to take like a tablespoon 3 to 4 times a day,
Hmm.
and then just kind of like taper off if you do develop symptoms. Plus, it's like
Hmm.
really yummy to
So
just
yummy, and kids like it. It's like
exactly.
it just yeah, I love that herb so much.
Mm-hmm.
And um I mean, with the Chinese herbal, what I'm seeing in like the Chinese herbal circles is really prevention with astragalus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then as much as possible, honing the treatment to the patient. So working with a herbalist and a physician as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and also that everybody's talking about this, it's quote unquote damp quality, right? So like
Right.
this, it's like you can think of it like your body producing too much mucus, right? For people watching who aren't into Chinese medicine. Uh, but I think for that, the gut health is actually really key. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
if you have, essentially, if you have like a healthy, strong compost, you can handle a little bit extra moisture, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if your gut fire is already a little compromised, then it's going to be harder.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, everything you said about prevention, it is amazing that like the sleep, the gut health, the exercise, like those things just really um, they keep us vital, right? And on
Mm-hmm.
kind of an energetic level and also a physical level. And you see that on in epidemiology, you see that all over the place, right?
Exactly.
And we can argue all day long about the right herbal treatments, but those things won't change, you know?
Yes.
So it's both comforting and also frightening, I think, for us as modern humans who are used to having medications at the ready that will
Mm-hmm.
save us, actually, but we don't really have the leeway to overwork our systems
Mm-hmm.
right now. I think in the face of this virus, it's very humbling, right? We can't just keep moving at the pace of capitalism
No, and
and expect to stay healthy, right?
yeah, and that's I think part of the change that we're seeing as a societal whole is that we don't where what can we do away with and what do we actually need as like a society to like vision this future, that like actually addresses our needs. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's I'm seeing this time as such an opportunity, and also where our traditional medicine is really shining because we've known this and we've been saying this, and
Hmm.
now the Western world is like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah. And I was just looking at some forums today of like Western herbalism mostly. So people like Matthew Wood
Hmm.
and other people compiling resources. And it's really interesting to see people with who are learning herbalism, right? Like in these times of emergency, basically, like having a loved one fall sick and
Hmm.
you know trying out their skills, like they're under just the understanding of energetics, right? That this herb is cooling and trying it out, and oh, that doesn't work.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm going to use garlic and ginger because they're warming, and then that works. Or, I love this
Hmm.
too. I think that all the spices, like you said, like prevention with all those aromatic spices,
Hmm.
right? They're like it's interesting. Like in the old days, we would use them for incense to like clear the air, right? And they
Hmm.
do the same thing
In the
inside us,
body,
right? So
yeah.
like all of that cinnamon and turmeric and cardamom, all the chai
Hmm.
spices, you know.
Exactly.
And but yeah, like to me, what this highlights is how, reclaiming that grandmother herbalism, right? That
Hmm.
we should all have something in our cabinets that we can use if the time
Hmm.
arises, and
Yeah.
really diffusing that information out into the world.
And it's just, I mean, most people are being turned away from going to urgent care and
Exactly.
the ER. So
Exactly.
it's like we have to figure this out ourselves and like take control of our health. And that there's like empowerment in that. And it's really wonderful to see as a practitioner that's really all about like you know your body best, and we need to like listen to it, and like these symptoms are cueing us to see like a deeper pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And so just the ways that we're taking or listening to our bodies now is
Mm-hmm.
really an opportunity.
Yeah, and the opportunity to remember old ways of knowing, like
Mm-hmm.
people were talking about getting information from dreams on this forum and like just like trusting your gut, right?
Yes,
Trusting that old knowledge and the indigenous ways of knowing which we all come from.
for sure.
Yeah,
I did want to share one other remedy that I'm really loving right now.
please do.
Um, turkey tail.
Ooh, yes, the
Turkey tail, the
mushrooms.
mushrooms. The Chinese medicine like the mushrooms right now? Does
Loves
that
the
help with it?
mushrooms.
Okay. Good.
Yeah,
We're aligned.
cordyceps is a big
Mm-hmm.
one. And
Yeah.
yeah, what so turkey tail specifically, I only know that for like breast cancer specificity.
Ah, okay. Well, turkey tail, it's actually being studied in like immunocompromised patients.
Okay.
But like the full complex of the mushroom rather than like some mushroom products that are just like
Mhm.
extracting active ingredients. So yeah, turkey tail is also really supportive for like the immune system, and
Mhm.
it's like natural killer.
Mm.
So
Oh,
all of
yeah.
these.
That's what we want. I
Mm-hmm.
also know reishi has been talked
Yum.
about a lot. Would you say that um, also as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm about like the whole mushroom complex,
Right.
like the mix of different mushrooms in their wholest form.
And do you,
Yes.
and from my understanding, you would want to decoct that, right? Or like a powder
Mm-hmm.
or even the whole mushroom, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
dried mushroom, make a tea out of it.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. That's how I'm taking it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are alcohol extracts, right? Like tinctures. How do those
Yeah.
compare to making a tea?
Um, I think that's just like a preference aspect. I mean, um, I believe most are being studied in like the consumption. Um, and what was I going to say? But like they're also being used in like spray form to like coat the
Mm.
back of the throat if you are having like throat and cough symptoms. So like that direct, what is it?
Like,
Action,
yeah, local action.
coating, local action. It has been like shown to be really soothing and also preventative.
Wow.
Um,
I realized that.
but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not too sure. I'll look into that, the tincture versus um, the
I also
tea
think
at this
about
point.
sprays like I've seen echinacea and propolis sprays, and echinacea we could talk about as well as far as like immunity, but also traditional uses, which that's
Mm-hmm.
one. Elderberry is so linked, like the kind of modern research and the traditional uses, but echinacea is so different, right? Like from
Yeah.
what I understand, how like native people of the plains used echinacea and how it's actually used by modern herbalists is really different, which is interesting. But uh, yeah, that those throat sprays, I think, if we're talking about local action, can
Mm-hmm.
be really helpful.
Yeah. A part of me like doesn't even utilize echinacea that much because of its complex history and like how much I really don't know about um, how like native folks have used it and how it's like I don't know, has it been appropriated for use? I just like um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I think
I
the answer
tend
is
to not
yes.
use that.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding of that is like the traditional Lakota herbalists that I did know
Mm-hmm.
um, corroborated. Like Matthew Wood is not native, but he does hang out with a lot of native healers.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like as a non-native person, he's very respectful and cites his sources. And he's the one who I learned that from,
Mm.
that German herbalists actually appropriated echinacea and made the indications very different. So like, that traditionally its indications are snake bite and septicemia, like very like
Wow.
infection that's more like bacterial deep in the body in the blood.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's being used more like respiratory infection, like which is a very different thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be useful like when the respiratory infection turns bacterial, which happens, right, and goes
Mm-hmm.
deeper.
Right.
But to be used just by everybody and anybody as like an immune modulator is not actually accurate and
Yeah, it's
a
like
little
kind of
disrespectful.
disrespectful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also, he talks about it as a very deep, like if somebody is very deeply deficient and like
Mm.
overworked and gets sick when they rest, like dosing small amounts of that can be really helpful. And
Mm.
Shane Case, who is a native healer in Portland, uses the flower essence as it's very interesting, like as a differentiator of the energetic body, like for
Mm.
people who tend to be energetic chameleons,
Oh.
where they will take on the attributes of whoever they're around or whatever they're influenced by. So it's
Mm.
kind of like an immune response in the energy body, which is interesting, like
Yeah.
the differentiating capability of the immune system. So
It
yeah,
is a fine balance.
it is a fine balance, and it yeah, one to be careful with and respectful of for the
For
original
sure.
people who use that.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. We could
Thanks for
talk all day
sharing
about
that.
that.
I know. I love that.
Yeah, it's
Um,
hard. I mean, yeah, we could talk a lot about that.
we'll talk about all
We'll
the
talk about it more.
complicated
Yeah.
herbs another webinar.
Yeah. Like OSHA, right, is also very good, but it's
Yeah,
also like been foraged
big
into,
time.
yeah, and it's also an indigenous herb of North America. So yeah. But I love the ones that you talked about. And actually propolis is I think pretty easy to come by, and we could also
Mm-hmm.
talk about more like native herbs to this area too. And there are plenty of
Oh,
herbalists
yes.
locally, that are doing some really amazing work.
I would
So
absolutely tune into that.
stay tuned.
um,
Um,
oh, go ahead.
no, I'm done.
Um, because more people are managing themselves at home, some tools that could be helpful to kind of monitor where you're at and your symptoms, if it does get to that point, like a thermometer would really be great to have at home. If your temperature is remaining at 101 or above for more than like 2 or 3 days, it's really important to seek care. If you're an asthmatic, um, having like a peak flow monitor, it's like one of those little manual machines that you kind of blow into to see your lung capacity. That would be something nice to have and kind of monitor to see how well you're and how deeply you're breathing through inhalation and exhalation. And then also, if you're having like those shortness of breath symptoms, getting like a pulse oximeter,
Hmm.
oximeter, that would also be great. That's put a lot of my patients at ease when they're like having shortness of breath and it's like something new that they've never experienced before. Having a pulse oximeter and seeing that like actually they're still at 98,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
still fully oxygenating their blood, gives patients like a peace of mind and can give you also peace of mind. But if it gets to below or at 95, like immediately seek care. So
And
those
are
are like,
those, oh, sorry, are those things that can be found online, or where would people find those
yeah,
tools?
definitely online. I'm thinking like a lot of um, like commercial drugstores are starting to run out of those things, but I mean, they're also being fully stocked.
Okay.
Like trucks are still running, deliveries are still being met. So it's worth a try to even see if they're at stores, but definitely available online.
Maybe we can drop a link. We'll
Yeah,
drop some links after this.
we'll drop links. Yeah.
Is that your list?
That's that's like some of my list. There's so many
Well,
other
that's
things, but I it's
we can
just
do a part two. We don't have to do it all today. If
oh
there's
I'm
anything
actually
else that you feel like people really need to know about, you're welcome to go ahead.
oh, thanks. I'm curious also about the research that you're reading about ibuprofen and aspirin use.
Oh yeah.
Um, a lot
Um,
of like docs and even folks in the emergency room are recommending that people stop taking ibuprofen if they can, like if it's not a necessity, if they don't have like a heart condition, but it's just something that um, people are taking for like body aches or for fever. It's like recommended that you don't use any fever reducers, but to actually mount a fever response, actually have a fever and then break your fever, rather than using those medications because
mm,
of the binding of like the COVID to the lungs and how ibuprofen kind of interacts with that
mhm.
system. That's an oversimplified way to explain that,
Right.
but
Yeah. It's
yeah, I kind of
complicated.
wanted to know what your thoughts were around that since it's
Yeah.
commonly used medication.
I know, I'm sure that you know more about the mechanism of that than I do. I just have heard secondhand from people who have been scouring the research that that's true. That people, it sounds a little bit hypothetical, but its potential is maybe severe enough that we don't really want to risk it. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's maybe one of the examples of what scientists are doing right now, which is like, okay, we see this thing and maybe it's this thing and we just want people to be as safe as possible, and so we're trying to like cover all the bases,
Mm-hmm.
and including you know medications like ibuprofen that would make COVID-19 infection worse. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, that's something where Chinese medicine can really give us tools, right? If it's about pain, then
Absolutely.
doing some self-care and self-massage or like other things that will manage that pain. And if it's possible for at home, we have more time. Maybe it is a time that we can work on other ways to manage our pain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a video on like ear massage for pain that I can post for people. But yeah, the non-pharmaceutical interventions for pain, I think, are really important right now, especially in
Mm-hmm.
light of that information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
really, yeah, I mean, it's just this time is just asking us to really assess the habits that we've been engaging with and what's actually useful for us right now and what we can do away with to try something new.
yeah, yeah.
We commit to our wellness
Well, we're
along
at
the
about
way.
an hour, so shall we wrap it up?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
We should say before we take questions that, as Dr. Adrian said, this video is in no way meant to be medical advice. It's best to work with your physician, especially somebody who's familiar with herbs, like Dr. Adrian, also an acupuncturist. But COVID-19 is serious enough that you definitely want to be in contact with your PCP if you're showing any symptoms. Uh, so, yeah, but where can people find you and check to see if they're interested in getting in touch with you or getting on your books or learning more about you?
Yeah, you can find me at my clinic's website. I'm practicing in Southeast Portland at Heart Spring Health, and taking advantage of telemedicine right now. So we can meet virtually from the comfort of your home and mine. And I'm taking most insurances right now. So a lot of insurance companies have kind of catered to the times and are waiving copays or um, creating just more access to practitioners. So I'm at Heartspring Health, or you can find me on Instagram and send me a message, and I can send you more direct links.
Cool.
Um,
What's your handle on Instagram?
I'm at Dr. Adrian, uh,
All one word?
all one word.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
So you'll get to see some of my organizing side as well as my
Awesome.
health work. But also, like, if you are uninsured or don't have aren't established with a PCP and you are starting to show symptoms, the best place for you to go is to speak with the county health department. They'll be able to like triage or talk through what you're experiencing and direct you to services. A lot of those folks are actually being directed to my clinic anyways, so we may be in contact. Um, but that could be a good starting point. And they're actually really lovely over the phone. They're really responsive. So that could be just a first step if yeah you don't have you're not established anywhere yet.
That's a great point because I do think there's a lot of people who just don't have a PCP and now they're like, what do I do? Who do I go to?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that information.
Absolutely.
Um, Thank you so much for your time and
Oh yeah,
yeah, all the amazing expertise that you bring and world experience.
this was so fun. Thanks for having me.
Yay. Io. Now I see it's you. Do you have any questions? Who the one person that's watching? Maybe that's still Io. Um, Throw questions in the chat. Um, it doesn't look like it, so I guess we'll call it a day. And people might comment later. So
Well,
yeah,
stay tuned.
we will stay tuned and for the next episode. Thank you
Thank
so much, Dr.
you.
Adrian.
Thank you so much, Adriana.
I'll see you soon.